I raised my stepdaughter for over 20 years, but at her wedding, she ignored me and gave all the fatherly roles to her absent biological dad. Now I'm questioning everything about our relationship. I have been in my stepdaughter Sarah's life for over 20 years. I married her mother, Lisa, when Sarah was 6. Her biological father, Jack, was largely absent during her early years. He'd pop in and out sporadically, usually around holidays, only to disappear again for months, sometimes years, without explanation. In contrast, I was there through everything. I taught Sarah how to ride a bike, helped with her science projects, and supported her when she wanted to quit soccer because she didn't feel good enough. I thought we had a bond that no one could break. Fast forward to last year, Sarah got engaged to her longtime boyfriend, Daniel. I was thrilled for her and offered to help with anything she needed. From the beginning, I noticed her demeanor toward me had shifted. She was distant, almost curt, which wasn't like her. I brushed it off as wedding stress. After all, planning a wedding can make anyone a little frazzled. But then, the small things started adding up. I overheard Lisa talking to Sarah about the seating arrangement one evening. Lisa casually mentioned something about where Jack would sit. I assumed she meant somewhere in the audience. But when I asked, Lisa hesitated before saying, "Sarah wants her father to walk her down the aisle." The words hit me like a truck. I didn't say anything at first because I wanted to respect her decision. After all, he's her biological dad. But I couldn't shake the thought that, while Jack had been MIA for most of her life, I had always been there. Still, I convinced myself it wasn't a big deal. Walking down the aisle is one moment. Surely, I'd still play a role in her big day. Or so I thought. When the wedding invitations went out, I noticed my name wasn't listed as father of the bride. It simply read, parents of the bride. Lisa and Jack. I felt a lump in my throat but decided not to make a scene. It's just wording, I told myself. Then came the rehearsal dinner. Sarah barely acknowledged me the entire evening. Jack, on the other hand, was treated like a VIP guest. She introduced him to everyone as Dad with such warmth and pride. I tried to engage her a couple of times, asking if she needed anything or how she was feeling, but her responses were brief, almost dismissive. It was as if I were just another guest. On the day of the wedding, I arrived early, hoping to find a moment with Sarah. I wanted to tell her how proud I was of her and wish her well, but every time I approached her, someone else would whisk her away. When I finally caught her alone for a brief second, she barely looked at me. "Sarah," I started, my voice trembling. "I just want you to know I'm really proud of you. You look beautiful." She nodded politely, muttering a quick, "Thanks," before rushing off. No hug, no smile, no warmth. When the ceremony began, my heart sank. Jack walked her down the aisle with tears in his eyes, beaming like he'd been there all along. As they passed me, Sarah didn't even glance my way. At the reception, I found myself seated at a table far from the bridal party. Jack was seated with Lisa, Sarah, and Daniel at the head table. It was like I didn't exist. I spent most of the evening watching from a distance, feeling like a stranger at a wedding I had emotionally and financially invested in. During the father-daughter dance, I had to excuse myself to the bathroom. Watching Jack hold Sarah and seeing the joy on her face felt like a punch to the gut. It was the moment I realized that, in her eyes, I wasn't her father. I was just her mom's husband. A week after the wedding, I finally confronted Sarah. I asked her why she had treated me the way she did. Her response floored me. "Look, I appreciate everything you've done for me, but Jack is my real dad. I didn't want to hurt your feelings. But it's my wedding, and I wanted him to have his moment." I told her I understood her wanting Jack to be part of her day, but I couldn't understand why I was completely sidelined. She shrugged and said, "It's not that deep. I didn't think it mattered to you." Didn't matter? How could she not know how much it mattered? It's been 6 months since the wedding, and our relationship hasn't been the same. I still love Sarah, but there's a distance now that feels insurmountable. I've tried to let it go, but every time I think about that day, the hurt resurfaces. Lisa has tried to mediate, but even she admits Sarah handled things poorly. Jack, of course, has gone back to his usual disappearing act. He hasn't called Sarah once since the wedding. I'm left wondering, was I just a placeholder until she could have the real thing? Or was I never truly dad in her eyes?